Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
6:07 on O'Connor and Company. Thank you so much. 1 hour down, 3 to go here on our morning show. If you missed anything so far, well, you can always subscribe to our podcast so you can be up to speed. Otherwise, just stay with us now for the next 3 hours before we usher in Chris Plant and his entourage. Coming up in 30 minutes, George Fishman of Center for Immigration Studies will join us at 7:05. Congressman Ralph Norman, he's a critical voice right now, who is skeptical about the big, beautiful bill. That'd be a tax cut, by the way. I don't know why we're not calling it a tax cut. Isn't that weird? Why not just call this a big tax cut bill, right?
I agree, yeah.
We're usually pretty good at branding things. This is, it's a tax cut. Good. No, we're pretty bad, actually. 7:35, General Jack Keane on the status of the Russia-Ukraine war. And then at 8:05, Dr. David Samadi on Prostate-Gate. I'm just calling it Prostate-Gate. You can't stop me. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Well, we do have some updates on Prostate-Gate. First of all, Dr. David Samadi, who I told you was joining us at 8:05, he joined Megyn Kelly yesterday on her uber-popular podcast and video streaming apparatus. And he had commentary on everything that we know so far about the status of President Biden's prostate cancer. They did put out a statement of sorts, a photograph of Joe and Dr. Jill and their cat.
Oh, dear.
I don't know why the cat was wrestled into this picture. I thought they had a dog. Didn't they have a dog that bit everybody?
I think they killed both dogs.
That they sent the dog to a farm.
Sure.
Which is kind of a euphemism.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Biden.
And that cat looks unhappy, by the way.
The cat does not look pleased to be there in any way whatsoever. Somebody zoomed in and isolated the cat's face and just retweeted it saying, "Help!"
And for those who say that cats can look nice, yeah, they can. They can. But not Joe Biden's cat. No.
Even when cats look nice, they still look like they're plotting something.
That's true. It's true. Yep.
Joe Biden, or whoever runs his social media X account, posted that picture and then said, "Cancer touches us all. Like so many of you, Jill and I have learned that we are strongest in the broken places. Thank you for lifting us up with love and support." That sounds like AI. Seriously, I'm sorry. What? I feel like I'm somewhat intelligent and I have an artistic sentiment or temperament. Jill and I have learned that we are strongest in the broken places. Can you unpack that for me? Is this like a Meghan Markle podcast?
I don't want to, but you said AI. Remember when they used AI to place Biden in the family Easter photo? Which looked like he was standing in a hole on the deck. Yeah, I mean, this family doesn't surprise me with anything.
Here's Dr. David Samadi with Megyn Kelly yesterday.
So you're saying that jumped out at you, the fact that they're stating, in their statement, they say, the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. You're saying, how would they know that this soon?
Right, exactly. So if he was just a week ago, they had the prostate nodule. Within a week, they did the biopsy and they got the disease. So very quickly, within 1 week, based on the story that they're telling, they've been able to do the staging part and find out if the cancer is spread to the bone or not. But you have to give the injections and see if the patient responds. We don't know what his PSA is. If the PSA starts to go down, then that's when you know that he's hormonal sensitive. I don't know how they will be able to give all of this information from diagnosis to treatment to all of that within 1 week. The story doesn't make any sense.
The story does not make any sense. In other words, according to that expert, Dr. Samadi, who again will join us at 8:05, for them to know so much about this case of prostate cancer, they had to have known for quite some time. All right, well, that's Megyn Kelly, crazy right-winger, right? Well, how about Morning Joe? Yesterday, MSNBC, they had Dr. Zeke Emanuel on there. He also actually worked in the Obama administration on health policies. And yes, he is a member of the Emanuel family, I believe, the Rahm Emanuel and Ari Emanuel. Here he is responding to what they knew and what his speculation is.
You're an oncologist, obviously. incredibly respected. You believe that it is likely, just for those just tuning in, you believe it is likely if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
So again, I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you were saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
Okay.
I have to say, it's very interesting. A friend of mine, Kelly, was talking about how she has been talking about this. She's been beating this drum for quite a while, how Biden had a colonoscopy in November of 2021. And she talks about how he actually had evening events both before the colonoscopy and after the colonoscopy. And she talked about, look, most people our age have had a colonoscopy. You're not leaving your house. Okay. You're actually not leaving your bathroom. Okay. The preparations for a colonoscopy. She has this really interesting theory that, and she has way before the prostate cancer was diagnosed, she was talking about how she thought it was related to his brain, that they said it was a colonoscopy, but he went to Walter Reed for a brain scan. Now she's like, nope, it was the prostate. So the bottom line is there are again, if we had a responsible media that would dig into this stuff and ask questions, and maybe have asked questions in 2021 about how are you having a colonoscopy, but you've got an event that night and other things that just don't pass the smell test, maybe we would have known. But again, a media willing to do that. You could hear the pain in Joe Scarborough's voice. Right?
Oh, yeah.
He's like, wait, let's back up,
There's so many jokes that I'm stifling right now about him having a
colonoscopy.
Colonoscopy, but it's really a brain scan. Well, he did have his head up his butt most of the presidency. Didn't I just say that I was suppressing those jokes? All right, a little bit more. In fact, Morning Joe had another doctor on to talk about this and to talk about an interesting development here. This doctor, before going on the air, wanted to check on the medical records of past presidents, on their archives and what we know and what we've seen. He checked on Bush's and Obama's and Trump's and saw all the information that their doctors had released about their prostate tests and their PSA tests. Strangely, one former president, had no information to be found at all. It also happens to be the oldest president and the president who is now just revealing that he has a major case of prostate cancer. Why would we not be able to find those medical records and those evaluations when we can find all those other presidents' evaluations? It's almost like they don't want this information to be found. It's almost like a cover-up.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Did they do a digital rectal exam to assess his prostate? Again, typically that's done in the presence of symptoms. To your point, he's the leader of the free world. Did they do it and not characterize it? It's hard to know. We're speculating here. I would say in an abundance of caution, probably be holistic and comprehensive. That would make sense. It is interesting to note that President Trump's, President Obama's, and President Bush II, in their most recent physicals, in their terms of office, obviously 2025 for President Trump, did comment on their PSA levels. And so they got screened while in office, and they commented on it. It's not easy to access the most recent ones from President Biden. You can read the summary articles. I couldn't access it on the archive site on the White House just before I came on. But according to those that were able to, there is not a report of a PSA test on the most recent physical that was read out for President Biden's last year in office. And so it's to say what was done, what was not done. You and I would be speculating, but the other three most recent occupants of the White House had it drawn.
All we're left with is speculation at this point, and that's a symptom of the fact that this White House, the former White House for President Biden, has always been reluctant to release any information and be forthcoming about anything. And if you dare to ask about it, or, as we are forced to do, speculate, you're a conspiracy theorist, of course. But it's a funny thing, all those conspiracies that we theorized about all ended up being validated eventually. So let's talk about this. This is a PSA test. This is, there's two different ways to test for a prostate problem. One of them is a rather invasive test that you can picture if you're a woman, and if you're a man, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And lately, actually, for the last, I want to say 15 years of my life, at least, maybe 20 years, they do this blood test. Basically, they take you go for an exam, they take a bunch of blood, and then they run, your cholesterol test, and they look for these indicators and those indicators, and then you come. It's almost like your physical these days are reduced to just a huge blood test, right?
Yeah.
And based on any kind of elevated hormones or any other elevated whatever they see in your blood, they can say, hey,
the moment they put the needle into the results, you're convinced you're dying.
Exactly. You're
Yes.
holding your breath until you have
Yes.
that meeting. And a lot of times the doctors are like, well, I want you to come back in and we'll talk about it. Oh,
I
here
know.
we go.
God. Oh.
Here we go. And so but one of those tests, it's really easy. You just check the box. The doctor checks the box, do the PSA test. And the PSA test looks for elevated indications that would suggest that potentially you do have a problem with your prostate, right? It's the easiest thing. So now the speculation yesterday was, well, maybe Biden opted out of that test. Why in the hell would you opt out of that test? It makes no sense at all. It literally makes – they're still taking your blood, so just take the test. But now there are no results to be found anywhere of the PSA test.
This does shine a light on Kevin O'Connor, who was Biden's doctor and who
No relation.
who certified his health. I mean, again, there's going to be – look, as Joe DeGenova said, this isn't just a congressional investigation. This needs to be a criminal investigation. I mean, because again, we had an auto pen, we had pardons, we had a Democrat. I mean, and again, this also goes to his sort of mental decline. But there's a lot of questions for the people surrounding him.
By the way, it turns out that Kevin O'Connor, no relation. I do have a brother named Kevin. It's ironic. The physician who did all of these. Oh, he's a clean bill of health, sharp as a tack, never been healthier.
Yep.
He also is involved in a lot of business dealings with the Biden family, with Biden Corruption Inc.
Dirty.
Let's check on CNN and see how Jake Tapper was reporting on this story. Let's listen.
Let me ask you, Jeff, in light of Vice President Vance's remarks, what is the current White House saying about President Trump's health and President Trump's doctors?
Well, of course, President Trump was the oldest American to be sworn into office as president. He is 78, so he's a bit younger than Joe Biden.
Okay, well, there you go. They did a whole segment on what's Trump hiding.
Just amazing.
Honestly, they couldn't be any worse over there.
They
But yes,
really-
J.D. Vance did comment and say that this is unbelievable and outrageous, and clearly there was a lot going on in that Biden White House that they were covering up, and we're just now, frankly, I mean, I'm shocked that only 110, 115 days after the fact, we're actually finding out some of the things that they were hiding.
I honestly, I cannot wait for the biographies and books about Jill Biden. Jill Biden.
You think Jill is still the evil hidden hand behind all of this?
Good grief. You imagine, ambitious staffers, doctors feeling pressure, whatever, but Jill Biden allowing her husband to be treated this, it's monstrous.
You answered every question.
You're so good.
It's 6:22.
Coming up, we'll talk to George Fishman, Senior Legal Fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies. We'll talk to him about SCOTUS's latest ruling that allows Trump to strip Venezuelans of their temporary legal status and why Democrats don't understand the word temporary. Keep it here. It's 6:30.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Good Tuesday morning, 6:37. Thank you so much for being part of our conversation today. Coming up at 7:05, Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina, find out where he stands on the tax cut bill, the reconciliation bill. All eyes on Congress this week. 7:35, General Jack Keane will join us, retired four-star general. We'll get his take on the Putin phone call yesterday with Donald Trump. 8:05, Dr. David Samadi on what we're calling Prostate-Gate. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Are you taking a picture of me without my
That's right.
approval?
I am. Always.
I saw you sneak your smartphone up there and it looked like you were taking my picture.
Sometimes I send pictures to the kids.
All right.
Because it's a school day.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Joining us, I don't understand, but it's all right. Joining us right now is George Fishman. George Fishman is the senior legal fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies. They know the ins and outs of immigration law, which is, something that I assure you most of the talking heads on cable news don't know. George, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
So the Supreme Court decision yesterday, it appears to at least temporarily allow for the Trump administration to remove the T from TPS, the temporary protective status that many illegal immigrants were able to enjoy while under President Biden. This affects over 300,000 Venezuelans. And forgive me, I just want to confirm this. The vast majority of these Venezuelans didn't actually come to this country on their own. The Biden administration actually flew them in. They went and got them, right?
Well, there's there were two programs, especially for Venezuelans. The first is the temporary protected status one, which the Supreme Court ruled on just a day or two ago. The second one was a parole program in which, yes, in fact, aliens could fly in at the invitation of the Biden administration. This Supreme Court decision regards the first program, TPS, and TPS is for people who've already come into the United States, usually who are here illegally.
I see. Okay. And there was one federal judge that stopped the administration from being able to do this. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. But is this temporary? Is this still being adjudicated? Will there be some sort of – I mean, there's so many of these cases, George, and if you could just sort of, if possible, give us sort of a status report on the administration's ability to execute the laws of the land. That's what the executive branch is supposed to do, is it not? Because it seems like every attempt to do so is blocked by a lower federal judge, and in some cases the Supreme Court is upholding those blocks.
Yeah, it all goes to the temporary protected status statute, which Congress passed in 1990, and it deals with situations where there's a natural disaster in another country, where there's an ongoing war in another country, and the president has the option to temporarily allow people, usually here illegally, to stay in the United States for a period of 6 months up to 18 months, while that natural disaster or man-made disaster in that other country plays out.
Of course, we know Salvadorans are in this country from, I believe, a hurricane or an earthquake from like over 20 years ago. So, look how temporary that can be. Can you remind me, George? And I apologize for not. I apologize for not knowing this, but what was the big disaster in Venezuela that suddenly we opened our doors to 300,000 people from that country?
It wasn't a natural disaster. Presumably, it was the political instability. It was the regime of Maduro. So it can be a war. It can be an internal revolution or civil war that can trigger it. But again, just as you said, abuses of TPS have become legion. I once pondered that had the volcanic eruption in Krakatoa, I think in 1879, occasioned TPS, probably those aliens and their descendants would still be in the United States under TPS for something that happened over 100 years ago. Abuse has become legion prior to the Trump administration.
It has become legion, and also even this you mentioned like political turmoil or war. Those things don't necessarily mean human rights abuses or genocide. That's the thing that, to me, is one of the biggest abuses, is once there's political turmoil in a country, we open our doors. Well, there are lots of countries that there's political turmoil and there isn't sort of these widespread human rights abuses. So that too has sort of, people have taken advantage of that. Wherever there is sort of some disagreement in a country, it seems that especially, well, really only Democrats seems to think that we should welcome all of those people. And then when you have a situation like in South Africa, where white farmers really are facing violence and the loss of property because of their color of their skin, Democrats object. That to me is very, maybe you can explain that.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of hypocrisy going on. Unlike asylum, where an alien, usually here illegally, is claiming you can't send me back because I'll be persecuted. Generalized violence in a country, that doesn't qualify for asylum.
Right.
However, for temporary protected status, at the president's discretion, if there's a war, if there's generalized violence, which does not involve persecution, someone isn't being targeted because of their race, of their religion, something like that. There's just a very dangerous situation. The statute does allow a president, in their discretion, if they choose to give nationals of that country who are in the U.S. temporary protected status. But as you guys have indicated, when this is extended for years, extended for decades, it becomes a clear abuse of the statute. Because, for instance, if there's a hurricane and nationals of a country are given TPS status because of a hurricane, no one can reasonably argue that 10, 20, 30 years later, they still can't go back to their home country because of a hurricane that happened decades ago. It's a clear abuse.
Right, but then the argument becomes, well, they've made this their home, they put down roots, and then we're stuck where we are. Real fast, George Fishman, because you were the acting chief counsel for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. We heard from Tim Walz over the weekend when he was giving a commencement address that nobody's getting due process here, and that they should each have their day in court. What does that exactly look like when it comes to immigration law? What does a day in court look like, and is that a reasonable expectation if the Trump administration says, listen, you were here temporarily and now you go home? Or for that matter, we think you're Tren de Aragua, we think you're MS-13. Under Alien Enemies Act, we should be able to deport you, no questions asked. Do those people have an opportunity through habeas corpus or what have you to say, no, I'm not Tren de Aragua? What does that look like, that due process?
Yeah, I mean, under the immigration law, under the Constitution as the Supreme Court has interpreted it, to deport an alien who is in the United States, they deserve a hearing. So you have to give them a hearing. Once they have a hearing, you can deport them, but they do have an obligation. So they do have a right to a hearing. I
just want to be clear.
There's now a backlog in immigration court of 3.6 million cases.
Yeah,
that's the result of it.
I know, and it's horrible. And real fast, they get that hearing, and are they allowed to appeal the ruling of that hearing?
They are allowed to appeal. That's under the laws Congress has passed. Congress can change those laws, but under current law, they go before an immigration judge. They can appeal that to the Board of Immigration Appeals. They can appeal that to federal court. That can all be changed by Congress, but that's the law as Congress has established it.
And how long does that process take? Each decision and appeal until there's a final deportation order?
Yeah, it can take years and years. Yeah. Most of these people are not detained. We actually don't know where most of them are, even though they're supposed to give us their addresses. And that's why there's such an attraction to things like using the Alien Enemies Act, because you can use that. The president can use that if it's a situation that allows it to be used to get around all those procedural roadblocks, which really make it impossible to deport large numbers of aliens under the standard immigration law. The highest number of aliens who have ever been removed under standard immigration law removal proceedings, the highest number ever, was about 238,000 in 2009. So to get appreciably higher than that, you're going to have to use alternate mechanisms, if they work, such as the Alien Enemies Act, such as during the COVID pandemic, use of Title 42. But use of the standard immigration law, that's the roadblock we have.
I appreciate it, George. I'm sorry for cutting you off. I know it sounds rude, but I'm a slave to the clock on the radio, and I've already broken free of the chains too many times this morning. Thank you, George Fishman from the Center for Immigration Studies. It's 6:48.